Anxious, rattled, erratic. All these words have been used recently to describe Donald Trump's behavior amid warning signs about the long-term health of the economy and, by almost direct extension, his own re-election prospects. There is no comfort to be found in the polling for Donald Trump. The new numbers have his approval rating in the absolute basement, maybe even the sub-basement. 36% approval rating. His disapproval at 62. That means he is 26 points underwater. Those numbers are really not good. And there's also warning signs hidden deep within the polling. But here's one that could prove to be a canary in the coal mine. Trump's approval among white women with no college education. According to this week's NBC News Wall Street Journal poll, almost half of them would vote for a generic Democrat over Trump. He is -6 among non-college white women, despite a plus 27-point margin in that demographic back in 2016. That is a big swing. Heidi and the table are back. Doug, I'll start with you since you're the new voice at the table. You're sitting there, you're a Democratic consultant, you look at these numbers of President Trump's and you're saying, man, slam dunk, we got this in the bag, or you're like, that guy pulled it inside straight in 2016, we got to be careful.
I'm looking at the number that shows that he still has a approval rating above 50 on the economy. And that's what I'm worried about. I think all these other ones are great. And when you pair him against a number of Democrats, he gets beat. He doesn't even get above 40 in a Fox News poll, but they still approve of his handling of the economy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that away from him. I'm going to go directly at him and make the case that Trump is out for himself and that the biggest threat to the U.S. economy is Donald Trump. And he has an incoherent, rattling strategy to deal with the economy, and I'm going to go right after him on that.
Kimberly, you look at these numbers. I just cited the white non-college women where Trump ran the table against Hillary Clinton, by the way, in 2016, and now is underwater with them. Overall, according to this recent Monmouth poll, we can throw this up here right now. You look at the men-women split here. Look at what the women in the thing that jumps off the table here. 62% disapproval among women, 31% approval. You know, women crushed the Republican Party in the historic midterm election victories for Democrats in 2018. Women hold the key in this race, and Donald Trump is not in a good place.
He is not. And yes, that was one of the biggest demographics. I remember the day after the election looking at the exit polling of white women in particular and realizing that that was the magic pill for Donald Trump that pushed him over the top. And you see a lot of concern, a lot of softening of the support there. I still think it's too early to really make any sort of broad predictions based on this because congressional races are very different than presidential races. And I've seen plenty of reports, I'm sure everyone else has too, and talked to voters, women who say, well, we don't like how he tweets and I don't really like what he's doing, but they don't definitively rule out voting for him again if they voted for him before. So I still think it's early to watch, but I do think that that's a very important demographic.
I want to throw up one more set of numbers here just to look at these because we get to one of the things that Doug talked about where this AP NORC poll on key issues, this gets to something that's even worse than Doug suggested. Ooh. There you go. That's how bad things are getting for Trump. I'm not trying to contradict you here. I'm just saying the numbers are trending in the wrong direction. Trump disapproval rating on the economy, 51. On immigration, 60. On healthcare, 60. On foreign policy, 61. On gun policy, 61. Those numbers, those are consistent with a guy with a 62% disapproval rating overall, Rev, and he's a little better on the economy than on the rest of these. But man, you're looking for any bright spot in those numbers. Start digging through the crosstabs if Donald Trump knows what a crosstab is. There's nothing in there that he's walking away going, okay, here's my path to re-election.
The only path is if the Democrats don't know how to deal with that and use that and start fighting each other rather than beating down those numbers even further that is on the approval side. I would hope that as you go into the third debates now, that the Democrats focus on Trump, his lack of ability to really keep his promises in terms of the economy, how the tax cut affected those white women that have now switched, rather than seeing who can get the best soundbite on each other. We all know who's good or bad now with the sound bites. This one had a good night, that one had a bad night in the first and second debates. They ought to narrow in on Trump. And if you beat down those pocketbook issues, you soften them. It's like a boxer. You soften them in the body, and then you knock them out next year. But don't just keep going at each other, and that's the danger here.
There are a lot of reasons why I like having you at this table, and one of them is that you provide transitions that are nice and smooth. This one throwing straight to the Democratic race. Seth Moulton, Massachusetts congressman today, drops out of the race and says, showing that he is a sharper political analyst than he is a candidate, says, hey, it's a three-person race right now, Nick. He says, you look up, you got three people. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Joe Biden. That is the race. According to Seth Moulton, I think if you look at the numbers, let's take a look here at the RCP. Well, I don't think we have them, but I'm looking at them here. Biden at 28.8 is the Real Clear Politics average. Biden at the top, Warren and Sanders at 16 and 15%. Then everybody else single digits and below. So tell me what are you like Seth Moulton? You think it's only a three-person race?
Look, politics can always change, but it's remarkable for how long the race has been basically stable, with Warren being the one moving person in the race very much. Look, this is a party that is trying to decide what it wants to be after Obama. And they have to get through that process first before they can take on Trump. Now, Trump was unpopular before he was elected. He was unpopular after he was elected.
And on the day he was elected.
But he was still elected.
Yeah.
Because elections are about choices. And people said, I don't like this guy, but I'm still going to vote for him. And that does actually happen quite a lot. And so a lot is going to depend on who the Democrats nominate. You'll hear some voices in the party saying they'll call us socialists no matter what. Yeah, but some people are easier to attack as socialists than others.
Especially one who calls himself a socialist.
Yeah,
for
facts
instance,
and
like Bernie
policy
Sanders. That's a little easier to do, yeah.
Facts and policy matter. So I think the biggest thing we don't know is who's going to be on the other side of that fall debate stage.
Right. Heidi Przybyla, close follower of politics that you are. Is Seth Moulton right that it's only a three-person race? And if that's not true, who else is in the top tier if it's not just those three?
Might hurt myself by saying this, that I agree with him, but looking at the stability of the polls, and to Nick's point that, yes, the only threat here seems to be to Bernie Sanders from Elizabeth Warren, that we could envision a scenario where we roll into Iowa, and by the time we get to South Carolina, things are pretty set, unless there's some dynamic changes wherein these voters, these Democratic voters who are not budging and who continue to support Biden, for some reason no longer believe that he's the only thing standing between them and a third Trump presidency. And you heard Jill Biden the other day pick up on that and talking, even saying it openly in a speech. She was doing a sit down with voters, and she said, we just have to keep our priorities straight. We have to keep our eye on the ball here, and that is defeating Donald Trump. Right. Secondly, if the economy does continue to falter, I think Joe Biden's going to be in a strong position just because he comes from these, or he identifies with these Midwestern states that are going to be and are hurting the most.
Doug, I want to ask you, right? So this is the story of the week. Joe Biden, big lead in the polls. His wife comes out and basically says, hey, you might not love him, but he's electable. The polling shows electability matters most right now to Democrats. But this is a party, as you know well, Republicans fall in line, Democrats fall in love. And we see some signs of an enthusiasm gap for Joe Biden. Do you see those signs? And do you think he may be a little bit of a paper frontrunner?
I don't think he's a paper frontrunner. I think, look, he's very well known to the party. So, he has that going for him. He has his relationship with Barack Obama, which I am very surprised that other candidates have been sort of trying to go after the Obama legacy like they have. Obama has about a 96% favorable rating among Democrats. He's also the most popular politician in the country. So why you would go after that, I don't understand. I think that's a big mistake. To Seth Moulton's comment, though, I would just say there's a campaign in Baltimore, Kamala Harris's campaign, that I don't think you can write off, because I think she has shown moments where she can, she can have good moments on a debate stage. I think you keep an eye out for her. She has to sort of get her narrative and message right, but don't write her off.
There is a national campaign, and then there's the campaign that actually matters. It's the campaign in Iowa, where the first contest happens, and if you don't win there, suddenly electability goes out the window for everybody.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.